Nice moves.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this was, I think, when we started talking about this panel, I didn't even realize how much work you've been doing on the Agentic Cloud. I think it's sort of, if it works, nothing breaks. You don't hear about it. But so, I guess let's start with that. You were talking about the building blocks.
Yeah.
I think if people aren't building cloud-based agents, they may not know about everything that's out there to build on. So what are the building blocks that people in the audience could use right now?
Sure. So there's two paths. If you want to go code first, and you want to really get into the nuts and bolts of building agents, you can take a path through like Agent Development Kit and more fine-grained control. This will give you like the observability, the debugging, the tool management, tool creation, kind of all of those things bound together in a nice little package to help you get started if you're really after like refining and building agents themselves for the sake of getting value from those first coded agents. If you're more of like, I want to build an app, and the agent flow is like how I want to build an app, then we have a completely separate track, which is Gemini Enterprise. And with Gemini Enterprise, you can basically just go into UI, and you're like, hey, I want to look ahead my calendar this week, and I want to prep for any meeting. This is obviously one that I use all the time. And I want to prep for any meetings that I have. And because it has connectors to your calendar built in, because it has connectors to third-party data sources already built in, like your CRM, you don't have to fuss with all of like the data engineering and the data management. You can just define an objective for your agent. You have got the connectors built in. The agent now has context. It'll run ahead. It'll look at your calendar, and it will actually propose like, hey, based on who you're meeting with and the nature of those meetings, here's some ideas also for research. Here's some ideas for background that may be helpful to you in those meetings. So it really depends what you're building. Code first, and agent kind of optimization, ADK, and that takes you down a path of also orchestrating multiple agents. We'll get into, I think, probably agent commerce as well.
Yeah.
If you're trying to build apps, go to Gemini Enterprise and take the easy button.
Yeah. Well, so this is commerce. I'm gonna pick that right up. I got really interested in this because in the last few months, you've rolled out this new payments protocol that basically is allowing agents to maybe just put things in your cart for you to buy, or maybe actually buy things for you, really handing over the credit card to the intern, so to speak. I guess, how do you build up to that?
Yeah, so it really depends on your use case, but there are kind of two main paths for using this agent payments protocol. And again, we'll think about this in like terms of a stack. So first, we had to get agents up and running and give you the tools to get agents up and running quickly. So that's the ADK. Then on top of that, a lot of these workflows are going to be multiple agents. So we have the agent-to-agent protocol. And then, like once you're transacting and you're interacting across multiple agents, you want to exchange value. And so that's the agent payment protocol. And there are kind of two main use cases. One is, I'm going to give you some parameters, and I want you to go and like, if you're a sneakerhead, and you always miss out because the bots are getting you, because they're getting to the sneaker sales before you're able to get to the sneaker sales, you can define an agent that says, I want this type of sneaker and kind of these cost parameters, these features, and when it's available, I want you to let me know. And that's what we call a mandate. You give this agent a mandate, and it'll go out and it'll be monitoring the web, and once that condition, those guardrails are met, it'll come and prompt you. And then you have the choice to go and put something in the cart and to finish the transaction. There's another one, which is, I trust the agent to go and kind of curate all these things, to put it in the cart, and all I really want to do is finish the transaction. And so this has kind of two levels of mandate. There's like this initial set of guardrails, and then there's a trust mandate. And think of like travel. You want to go somewhere, you want to have a bunch of options put together for airfare, hotel, experiences. You're going to need multiple agents going out, bringing those things back, putting them into the cart, and saying like, okay, it's time to check out, and then the human can just check out. One really important thing about this, as a technologist, is that because we're in the early days of agents, agent payment protocol is like a whisper of the future, which is how do you automate the exchange of value? And this is relevant to, if you're a startup and you're trying to advertise your inventory, The future is you're going to be advertising inventory to a bunch of agents, and you want to get those transactions done in as much an automated fashion as quickly as possible. And actually, like human slowness and human weirdness about, like they'll go and scan your website, they'll look at your inventory, they'll leave it, they'll abandon the cart, they'll do all this stuff. In a way, we're also building, one, this kind of new commerce of the future and more of a consumer version, but also in a B2B scenario, you can imagine if you're like a large shipping company and you get millions of invoices every day, you want to be able to complete those transactions in the background, receive invoices, pay valid invoices, flag ones that might be, a little bit out of band, and do that in a highly scaled and automated fashion. So, expect to see more of these multi-agent, automated, real-time fulfillment, but you had to start somewhere. So you have to start with the foundations, just like the web. You have to start with the protocols and the rules of engagement for how you transact.
Yeah. So I'm glad, I think this idea of the transition to agentic commerce is so interesting and so kind of fraught. I want to pick on one thing you said. You were sort of saying, oh, okay, if you're a sneakerhead and those terrible bots keep snapping up the early sneakers, but like what you've built here is a bot for buying sneakers.
Yes, but it is a precision bot that you control, and now you are on a level playing field with these aggregators that would go and take all of this inventory and then they'd resell it and they'd jack the prices up. So in a way, we're also, fine-tuning these agent flows so that you can get more value out of, a workflow, and as an individual consumer or as a business, maybe you don't have to pay those intermediaries anymore. Maybe now you can operate with like the power that only, these aggregators had in the past.
Yeah, I think it kind of gets to the social complexity of it, where as we're in this world where maybe some people are using agents to buy things and other people are buying things on the internet, maybe some people are still buying things in stores, like how do you think about the perspective of the store where they say, are they going to be glad when the agentic buyers show up?
Eventually.
Eventually, yeah.
And the reason I say that is because how many of us have been designing against like robots.txt and like these, automated bots that come into your website or into your business, and in the past we might call these malware, or we might call these, cybersecurity incidents. So if you're the CISO, or if you're the head of security for any organization of a reasonable size right now, you have really had to flip your thinking from, the bots are bad to the bots are your customer. So that's why I say eventually, because they're right now, and it's kind of like this AI play counterplay. So now the CISOs, and there's a huge opportunity in cybersecurity where if you can build tools that can reason and rationalize this kind of inbound swarm or flood of agents into your organization, into your website, into your commerce platforms, then you're going to be able to take advantage of this kind of early mover. And if you aren't designing AI systems to kind of reason about these new behaviors, then you're going to get left behind. And as a technologist, one of the things I always think about is how do I get learning loops as quickly as possible? And so a lot of the leading edge companies right now, they're creating perimeters, or they're creating kind of sandboxes, or they're creating ways that they can characterize the flood of these agents coming in, and they can learn how to instrument against it faster. So it's kind of like you have to let them in a little bit so you can get the learning curve, but a lot of that's being designed right now.
Yeah. So one of the alternate visions of this, the other, major agentic commerce idea is, of course, OpenAI's instant checkout, where we're seeing these sort of company by company launching with Stripe. Okay, now we're partnering with PayPal, so PayPal can do it too. It's not the open protocol approach, but we're kind of back in the classic technologist struggle of, okay, do we want the walled garden? Do we want the open protocol? I guess, how do you think about the consequences of that?
I bet on open. I mean, if you look at the foundations of the web, if you look at the foundations of commerce today, underneath all of them are standards and protocols that were built in communities. And that goes from, how packets transit a network to how you trust that a site is exactly the site that it should be, to authorities around security. Starting with open is absolutely critical. And that's why, like in ADK that I mentioned earlier, you can bring models other than Gemini, into ADK and build agents using other people's models. This has been an approach that we have taken, and I've been at Google Cloud now for 11 or 12 years. And since the very beginning, it was Kubernetes, it was TensorFlow, it was open standards. It's how do we give you as builders an option where if you want to compose and manage yourself, you have these open versions and you have lots of choice. If you want to take advantage of some of the managed bits, we can do that for you as well. And so right now, like scaled use of AI infrastructure, it turns out that customers and businesses and builders don't want to pay reseller fees to get AI models and AI infrastructure these days. So they like coming to a place like Google Cloud where we have our own first-party models, we have our own first-party AI infrastructure, and we're not just reselling somebody else's stuff. And we also learn how to optimize, because that's true, because we have these things. We learn to optimize. So if you want scaled AI infrastructure, we can give you managed, scaled tensor processing units through Google Kubernetes Engine, GKE, in a managed way. Or if you want to roll your own like abstractions and you want to manage them yourself, like Anthropic and others, customers have been learning how to build and go from GPUs to TPUs along the way too.
Yeah. Please be careful rolling your own abstractions, though. That's dangerous stuff.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You're in for a pound, I guess, is one way to think about it.
So, I mean, we're describing a kind of world of agentic commerce that is not really here yet. But I guess, how fast do you see this coming down the road?
Well, I mean, I work with a lot of startups, a lot of enterprises, and I can tell you that the first iterations of these agentic workflows, generally speaking, it's kind of small-ish like numbers of agents. So I would say like, the swarms of hundreds or thousands aren't here yet, but in the tens to, getting to hundreds. The orchestration of them is a really important thing to think about. But there are quite a few deployments of AI agents right now. One, for example, Sully AI, which is a startup that provides in healthcare, basically like healthcare task automation agents as like a service to healthcare workers. So like there are a lot of administrative tasks you take care of every single day in healthcare. And Sully AI has basically created agents that allow them, using Google Cloud, that allow healthcare workers to take a lot of that administrative burden and minimize it so they can focus on patient care. So they are out in the real world and they are, creating value today. I think it's more of the multi-agent interactions, complex multi-agent orchestration that is the frontier. And
so do we think, when are we going to start to see that? I mean, is that like 5 years out? Is it 5 months out?
You're asking a technologist and a CTO to give a roadmap timeline with a surety in front of a large crowd. So,
yeah.
It's not my first rodeo, Russell.
Fair enough.
But what I will say is I think you can bet on like waves of innovation. So the first wave, which is just building singular task agents to accomplish singular function, is here now, and it's growing rapidly. So you could also kind of, this is semi-close to RPA and kind of the first iterations of automation. But we're rapidly getting to multi-agent orchestrated workflows within, I'd say, like one use case. So for example, marketing, generating creative. Right now, you can use Gemini as a front end, and you can say, hey, I really have an idea for this interesting creative thing, and using Imagine under the hood or Nano Banana under the hood, it'll give you a first order like, this is what it could look like. And then you can send it to VO, and it can turn it into a short-form video. But then you have other things that you need, like brand guidelines, and you need AI as a judge to say, like, is this content even something I would put out to my users? And so in those workflows, a lot of the innovations happening right now is like the AI being capable of evaluating the outputs, so that in my team we talk about like if you're a manager now, if you're in the flow of any work. Basically, AI has made your life a nightmare because it's stacking up all of these things that need validation or evaluation. And as a human, I think of it like folders on a desk. That's how old I am. So, when you were a manager back in the day, it's like you have a desk and people bring you their stuff and it's in a folder and you have to like approve it. And in the old days, it was gated by what humans could put on your desk, how fast they could get the work done. So it's like, okay, cool. Like every single day I get like 20 to 100 folders. I burn down through as many as I can by the end of the week, as long as it's down to 0 folders or a low number. It's great. Problem is now is that AI can create like infinite folders almost instantly. So one of the big unlocks for the, in the shorter run is going to be AI as a judge, AI evals, grounding in like brand guidelines or grounding in enterprise data that allows the outputs of these things to be contextual, to be useful, and to be things that companies are proud of and can actually use. Whereas like I think these big agent swarms, I think there's a lot of fragility right now in, for example, like in financial services. Say you want to build, I want to build the like financial advisor bot. Well, there's no financial advisor bot because financial advising is a series of tasks. There's like 10 to 14 tasks are involved in that. And trying to get 10 or 14 agents to reconcile their perspectives and synthesize that into like one output that can be delivered to a human today is a very complex process and is very much on the frontier, and I would say there's still room to go.
Okay, yeah. This idea of like stacking folders is so visceral, but it's also, I mean, right now we're still trying to evaluate, I mean, AI evals, when I hear it, I think, oh, you're talking about benchmarking and humans evaluating AI, and it's like, no, we need AI systems that can evaluate AI outputs.
Absolutely.
And start clearing the folders out.
We need to move at the same, that's the thing, is that like human cognition and human, you know, like evaluation runs at human speed, but like AI can generate content way faster than humans are able to go like, that's good, that's bad. And so you have to, that is like one of the key problems to solve in almost any workflow is how fast the decisions, how fast the content, how fast the analysis, the synthesis, the reports, depending on which use case you're in, how fast you can get AI to kind of sort through, take out the stuff that's obviously bad, and really queue up the human for the highest value, like evals, the most complex edge cases. You know, that's super critical.
Yeah. So that gets to this question that I think keeps coming up when we talk about these. Obviously, AI agents are making huge technical progress. I wonder if are they there yet? Is the missing piece really kind of more capabilities from the underlying agentic tech itself?
I think it's multiple things. So for example, you know, Gemini today, you know, leading frontier model, it's been that way for, you know, kind of 6 months plus, which in this world feels like an eternity. And that has to continue. So we definitely need innovation. We need more like reasoning capabilities. We need more kind of navigating and kind of like ambient capabilities inside the front end or like a frontier model like Gemini. So you need that. But you also need grounding tools. You need the ability to bring in enterprise data more easily. You know, some of this is going to be through connectors and, you know, creating tools and kind of like the old school publish and subscribe. If anybody's been around for a while like I have, you know, this is this concept of like publish and subscribe where you have data sources and they publish their availability and then you have consumers that subscribe to topics. We're back again. You know, we just use different words. And so now, you know, there's also a need for companies and organizations, if they haven't externalized their data through an API or through a tool, you know, they're at risk of like getting left behind or becoming irrelevant in a world like this. So you need the, you know, you need the connectors, you need the tools created, you need this kind of rich ecosystem of data sources available and APIs. You need API management. You know, you need a way to sort through and navigate against all of these different options. So, and that's just like 3 layers of the stack. If we had, you know, another like 3 days, we could go through kind of all the layers of it because there's also a lot of bindings in between that make these workflows useful like in the real world. But you have to, you can't just choose one area. Like as Google Cloud, like we can't just choose one area to innovate. We have to provide, and that's why we do, a complete end-to-end AI stack that is both first party, but also has, you know, is built kind of with open in mind. So, you know, we have Model Garden, we have, you know, agent gardens, we have these places where if what we have isn't at that point in time exactly what you need, you can go get it from somebody else. Those are the table stakes to be, you know, on the frontier of technology today.
Yeah. Well, so I want to ask about one specific layer that I think gets overlooked a lot, but these are incredibly powerful tools. Not everyone on the internet is as nice and friendly as we are. I guess I hear about, you know, generating these endless folders, doing all of this work at scale, particularly once payments are in the mix. Yeah. And I worry about the security aspect of do we need better tools for identifying bad actors, for validating agents so that we can sort of smoke out bad activity?
Yeah. Well, the answer to that is absolutely yes. And we're just at the beginning of this. So, you know, within like Google Cloud, one of the things that we focus a lot on is governance, security, trust. And quite often, trust, it's interesting because in the generative AI world, trust has this kind of new layer of it's not deterministic, and so it's like, do I really trust the outputs, and how do I create systems of trust? And I find that's as much of a barrier or something to solve as, like classic identifying potential, malwares, injection threats. So there's a track where the fundamental technology will continue to become, more secure. But then there's like this trust tier where, it's really about making sure that the AI is doing what it's supposed to be doing. So, observability, telemetry, evals, and believe it or not every company has exactly the same sensibilities about how much risk they're willing to take.
I've heard that, yeah.
So, there's also like configurations of this. And one of the things we learned very early on, you could say we've been very deliberate about safety and responsibility. One of the things that we discovered very early on is some companies would take our filtering and our settings, of kind of like, do you want it to be creative or do you want it to be definitive or authoritative? And so many people would actually set it to creative, way more than we thought. And so, for us, it's about surfacing a platform that you can configure your own filters and add your own governance to whatever, like your brand, how you want to take on risk. And that's way more important than us coming up with some singular vision of, like, how do you do risk management? And we operate in so many constituencies in Europe, EMEA, JPAC, in the Americas, and there are subtle differences in all of those. So we also we're building, agentic capabilities, being able to deploy in, infrastructure that's connected or sometimes disconnected. One of the projects that my team is working on right now in the CTO group is how do you give signals of intent of what's happening, but it can cross trust boundaries that are actually air-gapped, physically separated. Because you can't share the data itself, and obviously, like, AI hasn't figured out a way to like come out of the machine, walk over, and like walk into the other machine and figure,
Not yet, yeah.
Yeah, not yet. But there are emerging techniques to understand the intent of a workflow or kind of early telemetry, and then ways to like bridge the gap. And so that's also really, really exciting in terms of security, is being able to bring more AI and more capabilities of agents to scenarios that typically would have been closed off to AI, which is smaller compute shapes, disconnected infrastructure. That's really a frontier that I'm excited about.
Yeah. So we're sort of talking about this complex agentic world. Mm-hmm. Obviously, that's going to involve consuming a lot of cloud services, I think is a safe assumption.
That'd be great.
But we also don't know how fast it's coming, how soon it's getting here, how quickly we're going to solve all of these problems that you identify that we're actively working on. At the same time, we're in the middle of this unprecedented infrastructure build out. Meta has said they're going to spend $600 billion, in the next few years. We're getting $500 billion from Stargate. There are all of these sort of uncertainties about how fast all of this stuff we're describing will get built. I guess, do you worry that we're overbuilding as a kind of society and that there's going to be some harsh correction that gets in the middle of this?
I mean, to be able to answer that as like a society build, I would have to have a lot more data on the demand side.
Well, you can ask an agent
from other firms. I'd have to see demand signals from other firms to know. I can at least tell you from the Google perspective. One, I think AI has definitely redefined and kind of restarted the cloud market itself, and infrastructure being a large part of that. So we're in an entirely new game today when it comes to cloud and infrastructure. Second thing that is important about the scaled infrastructure moment is that there's so much demand. There's so much demand, Russell. And I think part of that is that we're in a place now where the frontiers are being built. And so you have multiple frontier model providers. And as we transition into inference, there's also a recognition, that we need to make sure that compute is readily available for inference. And so we're kind of building across segments right now. So like there's a segment of like the large AI labs, and they need availability to massive amounts of infrastructure for training and this continuous innovation development. But there's also another track, which is as more of these become real, inference becomes more and more important, and that's been a big driver, at least for us, on our tensor processing units, and going from really a training mindset in the past in the architecture to now with Ironwood, which I'm happy to report is in the hands of our first set of trusted testers through GKE. Ironwood was built for a world where, yes, training is going to be there, but inference is going to start to take the preponderance of workloads over time. And so 10x performance improvement year over year, 2x improvement in efficiency, power efficiency year over year. So those are the things that we're interested in is, we've done infrastructure at scale a bit at Google. And one of the things that we know is that to build correctly and build the right way is constantly looking for optimizations. So it may gather a lot of headlines about all the money that's being spent and all the infrastructure that's being proposed by a bunch of these players, but underneath the hood, we're busy making sure that our TPUs, we have over 1,000x performance improvement since the first generation of TPUs. We're now on our 7th generation of TPUs. And efficiency, when you get a year-over-year efficiency of 2x, these are significant engineering accomplishments. But we're also down in the networking layer. We're also down in how our subsea cables route traffic and do that in a highly performant way. And so our focus is optimizations at every layer of the stack, and those benefits accreting to our customers. And I'm not worried about demand from my chair right now.
Yeah. Although I want to unpack some of what you said, because it does sound like you see us turning a corner from how do we get enough compute to train these models, to how do we get enough compute to run these models, right? That is a fundamental turn, and also that comes with, if you're gonna, again, try to optimize at every level, you want different hardware. Yeah. That is, if you're optimizing for inference, that goes down to the chip level, and these are choices that we're sort of having to make as we build out 2 years from now, looking at the world 2 years from now, what are the compute needs going to be? You do have to choose between, are we going to build out for training or are we going to build out for infrastructure? Yeah,
well, and this is something, again, Google Cloud, part of Google, part of Alphabet. One of the things that we've learned over time in serving ML at web scale is how to serve ML at web scale. So this is not a new concept for us. And probably the thing that is most interesting for all of you is that we have as much demand for ourselves and for the web. And so from a stability of demand and stability of supply chain and stability of research and development, Google Cloud was built on startups. 15 years ago, or 12 years ago, roughly, when I started at Google Cloud, our largest customers were startups. And it was their ability to scale rapidly, kind of the success disaster. Like when Nano Banana hit, our QPS estimate was about 2 orders of magnitude lower than what it ended up being. And did it fall over? It absolutely did not. Why? Because at Google, we have been building scaled infrastructure systems that are highly reliable for decades. And so when you hit the success disaster with us, we understand how to dynamically drain shard jobs across pools. We understand how to do this inherently in our DNA, whereas I think a lot of our competitors are learning on the fly and have some aspirations in infrastructure that maybe exceed their track record. So I'm feeling pretty bullish about us.
Yeah. Well, we're almost out of time, but I did want to, backstage when we were talking, you had, there is so much uncertainty around just the pace of progress has been so fast. But you had this interesting analogy between the moment we're at with AI and the growth of cloud services themselves, where, how did you put it?
Yeah, it was, we tend to evaluate whether something is good or not based on its far in the future, best case scenario, which in AI may be fully autonomous, ambient AI assistant that understands you from a personal level, also understands you at work, and can provide very proactive recommendations, can run in parallel across a whole bunch of work tasks that you've given it, super complex stuff. And then we go what's available today, and we get really sad about the state of things. But if you go back to cloud, at one point it was just I need an API, I need to store something outside of my data center, or I need a little bursty compute for these jobs that had exceeded my own envelope. And then over time, it rapidly became the foundation for scaled data, scaled analytics, sovereign compute, all these shapes, all of these features, all these things emerged. And we're going to see the exact same thing in AI. We're in such early days in how AI is going to evolve and manifest itself. And so I see the thing repeating, and that's why I'm so excited, as you can probably tell, about the future and where we're headed.
Well, great note to end on. Thank you so much for coming down. This was such a fascinating
Thanks,
talk.
Russell.
All right, cheers.
Thanks.